And welcome to the Aviation and Transportation Subcommittee. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Okay. Welcome. First item is call to the public. Maribel Waters. I believe you need an interpreter. Thank you. You can use an interpreter if you need.
Good morning.
Morning.
We're just here to know what are the rules right now for taxi drivers, for taxis. We're having some issues, and I think we should know exactly where are we standing right now with all these applications that are around. What is our role for us, We've been here like for years and years, and then suddenly everything is not right, and we want to know what can we do.
I was going to say thank you. We can't respond to you today, but we certainly can get something on the agenda to talk about it in the future.
Can
Okay.
I ask the question? Are you
Sí, que no
coming
quede
from a taxi driver perspective or customer?
Es la perspectiva del manejador del taxi o del cliente.
I think both.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, next item is the minutes of the previous meeting. Do I have a motion?
Move approval. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Then we have our consent agenda, items 2 through 3. I think we need to have an action on the consent.
I'd move approval.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the next items 4 through 9, are for information only. Are there any items you would wish to find out more about? Okay, well then, let's move on to item 10. So item 10 is a little project I've been working on. It's a parking meter giving program. I had a chance to go to Laguna Beach a couple years ago. I have a cousin that lives there, and I saw these really cool meters, parking meters, with a lot of cool artwork, mainly beach type of artwork because it was the beach. And they actually were there to help curb panhandling and to help the homeless. So I brought this idea back, and the first thing I said is, do we have parking meters to spare? Because that's what happened in Laguna Beach. They went to the credit card parking meters, and so they had all their old meters, and they decided to use them for a good purpose. And so I'm going to turn it over to you guys to explain where we're at with it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Karen Peters from the City Manager's Office. I'm always really delighted to talk to the council about things that we are doing interdepartmentally. This is another great example of work that we're doing across various departments and thinking innovatively and working together. So with me today are Marshall Franklin from the Human Services Department, our friend Dan Clockey from Downtown Phoenix, Inc., and then Brianna Velez, Deputy in the Street Transportation Department. And we're going to talk to you about a potential pilot program that we'd like to initiate around parking meter giving, as you have described. So, what we've come up with is a program that we'd like to try over a 6-month time period after we get the meters designed and installed. And this would happen so that, as the chair has indicated, individuals could donate anonymously, either via credit card or spare change. We talked a lot about various ways to handle these donations and ultimately came to the conclusion that Phoenix Cares is a city program that could benefit from these donations, and Marshall will speak to that in a moment. As the chair indicated, Laguna Beach is one great example of where this has been implemented. Other communities in Arizona, like Prescott and Tucson, have similar ideas and have done these things, but also all over the country. We've been doing some research, and we've seen them in as far away as Pocatello, Idaho, and all over the country with differing approaches and degrees of success. But we wanted to give it a try here, and so I'm going to ask Marshall to talk about how we will do that.
So,
The reason why we were excited by this opportunity is that I'm sure you can appreciate that oftentimes individuals who are experiencing homelessness have an array of needs that oftentimes can be taken care of via our grants and federal funds we receive, but there are restrictions on that. And so oftentimes you find individuals that as we're trying to move them from shelter into some type of permanent housing are needing some things that aren't covered. And so we're either drawing from a little small pool of funds that we may have within our general fund budget or from donations. So when you talk about donations to this particular pilot program and some of the potential uses for it, for individuals who are experiencing homelessness, gift cards. So for example, you have individuals that you're placed in housing. We get them in the housing, but there aren't things like sheets and towels. We often find hygiene kits, so toothbrush, toothpaste for women, feminine products, eyeglasses. Sometimes we have individuals that we're working with who may be on the brink of eviction because we've had some challenges with unsafe structures. And there isn't necessarily money to take care of putting them maybe in a hotel for a day or two until we can find some type of housing for them. So it would be used for different services like that during this pilot. We, of course, would track that and be able to report back at the end of the 6-month pilot period how we utilize that money. But those are just a couple of the areas that we believe we could use this money to help further our efforts to address individuals experiencing homelessness. And now I'll have Dan.
Thank you. Thank you, Marshall. So I just wanted to follow up with a few details on the program and let you know how we came to this process. So every year the Downtown Phoenix Partnership does pedestrian counts in downtown. So we identify some of the most traveled intersections where obviously the most people are. And so we did that, and that was part of the process, and then working with Thomas Thorpe as well to identify the appropriate intersections for that. Next, we wanted to make sure that it was visible, but obviously not in the way. So we identified parts of the right-of-way where you could successfully place the parking meter, and also make sure that there's no confusion with the real parking meters so that people don't say, well, I paid at this and I thought I covered my parking. So we will identify specific areas that are far enough away from the regular parking meters. The third part that we're excited about, and I believe Katrina Kaler is here, is that we're going to be working with ArtLink on this to solicit local artists to design these and make them interesting, fun, and exciting to look at, a little bit extra in the right-of-way. And finally, then the messaging. And really, I think this is the most important piece of it all in a lot of ways. We want to make sure that people understand that this is about healthy giving, and about giving to an entity that can really leverage up the funds. When you're giving funding to someone, it's harder, I think, to get the whole wraparound services that we really need to help folks out. And so this is going to be an important part of talking about why we're doing this. And if perhaps the most important thing is just educating the public on this. And so we think this signage is really, really important. Here you see where we've identified some of the specific sites for the 4 meters that we'll start with. And again, these were based on high pedestrian count areas. So the northeast corner of 3rd Avenue and Washington Street, we thought that's a very high profile spot, obviously with City Council chambers being there. And so that was the first one. Second would be the northwest corner of 1st Avenue and Jefferson. There's a tremendous number of folks that use the courts that are on that corner a lot. And so these are people maybe encountering folks who are experiencing homelessness for the first time. And so this is a way to help educate them. The third one then is Central and Adams. This is sort of the main corner in downtown where there's so many people walking across Adams Street during lunchtime in particular, coming from the west, from Wells Fargo, from City Hall and so forth. And then the fourth one is 3rd Street and Van Buren, which is the corner of the Arizona Center, which they've just redone this whole area. We think it's a pretty attractive place to get the message out to folks. So these are the four areas that we're starting at. You can see little green dots maybe through, if you glance up at the map there. Those are some other possibilities that if things continue in the future, we could look at those as well. So, Brianna?
So we wanted to take a look at the program cost associated with implementing this pilot program. And so IPS Group is our current vendor who supplies our smart parking meters for us. And so these are our credit card and coin meters. And so they have a great charitable campaign that they do through their program that they will provide us with up to 20 smart meters. And this is the internal computer component for free and at no cost to the city. And so that means they also waive the service fees associated with using a credit card and debit card. So streets would need to provide the outside meter shells as well as the mounting post and the signs that will include the messaging that Dan mentioned, as well as batteries. And so all of those are one-time costs with the exception of the batteries. And so the batteries typically last, we're seeing about 3 months. And so a battery cost averages about $20. And so the entire cost to implement this pilot program is approximately $900. DPI has also said that they will install the meters at their cost of approximately $350 and that they would utilize their ambassadors in downtown to address any graffiti should that be an issue in the future. So as we look at the donation collection associated with this, all of the funds collected as part of this program would go into a unique account for Phoenix Cares. And so that gives us the ability to track and monitor how much we're actually accepting as part of this program. And so the coins would be collected by our existing parking meter staff. They would be collected monthly or on an as-needed basis. And they would be collected separately from our parking meters to make sure that those don't get combined. In addition, the great thing about the credit cards is that would be automatically deposited into a unique account for Phoenix Cares so that we could track that. In addition, obviously, Human Services manages the Phoenix Cares program and would manage the fund and the expenditure of those funds. So we want to look at the program evaluation. So obviously, we talked about a 6-month pilot and coming back and providing those results. And so obviously, we thought that should be based on the donations collected. So we will come back with an update on what we've collected monthly over the 6-month pilot. We also wanted to solicit feedback from DPI, any of the ambassadors, and any of the city departments that have been integral in making this pilot project come to fruition. Some of the discussion we've also had is potentially a survey to the public and kind of see if we could solicit feedback from them on what they think about this program and if they think that this is a worthwhile effort. And so we'd obviously return to the subcommittee within this 6 months, after the 6 months with an update on that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Karen, who will wrap it up.
Thank you. I really want to thank Dan and Downtown Phoenix Inc., Samantha Jackson from staff of DPI was really a great part of this discussion and collaboration, very creative, came up with lots of wonderful ideas, so thank you to DPI. I also want to thank ArtLink, who provided the solution for getting artists engaged in this, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of art gets installed on these meters. And Thomas Thorpe got a little bit of a shout out. He was our liaison with the vendor and did a lot of the groundwork in terms of what the other communities were experiencing with this. So I really want to thank him too. And with that, we're excited to get started and would ask for your recommendation.
Okay, thank you. We have one speaker card, Katrina Kaler. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Councilwoman Stark, Mayor Williams, Councilwoman Mendoza. My name is Katrina Kaler. I'm the president of ArtLink Inc., the nonprofit organization that is honored to partner in this program. I want to thank the city and Downtown Phoenix Partnership for embarking on this creative venture. We all know by the name Phoenix Cares that the city truly does care about this subject, and we are honored to engage in a process that allows for the arts community and specifically artists to engage in this matter and add a level of expression and articulate how much we as a community truly do care about this program. And we look forward to engaging in the pilot program and delivering results with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope we have a little plaque that honors the artist on the meter. Great. So questions? Yes.
Thank you. How much do you anticipate that we would receive, the city would receive in funding?
So in surveying the communities that have implemented this, it varies widely depending on the locations of the meters and a lot of other factors. I think if we are to get as successful as some of the other communities we've heard about, we could experience as much as $1,000 per meter per year, which is enough to fund a lot of the ideas that Phoenix Cares could implement. And if we are successful, even just short of that, I think we would, subject to the feedback that we get from the community, want to add meters so that we can realize more of that revenue.
Another question, for the art link, are the artists donating their time and the art? Because I didn't see any cost for the artists, so I was wondering.
Councilwoman Mendoza, members of the committee, we have a contract with ArtLink. We think it's important to pay artists to do good work, and so we are taking that on, and we are paying the artists to do that. So we will pay for some early submittals as possibilities, and then pay the end artists as well. So we think that's really important.
Okay, thank you. I have just one more.
For it.
I don't know if it's my luck, but there's some meters in downtown area that when I go and pay for it, I can't see the numbers or the time or how much I'm being charged. So I'm not sure if we're going out there to check these meters. I know that it's just hard to read, and I don't know if they've been damaged or I don't know what's wrong with it, but I just would hate to lose an opportunity at some of these meters where donations are going to be made if people can't see.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Mendoza, absolutely, we do go out and do maintenance, and so I will make sure that my team goes out and does a thorough review of the downtown meters. What you're seeing is the screens sometimes, due to the sun,
Right.
They deteriorate, and so you're not able to see where you're putting in, which is obviously taking away from revenue from the city. So absolutely, I will make sure that we get out there and do a thorough review of downtown to make sure we repair any of those screens that have deteriorated.
And I can give you some locations.
Oh, perfect. I will get with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Madam Chair. Yes. First of all, I want to thank you. It was a great idea.
Thank you.
And I know how we struggle to get some funds for these great causes. But how soon would this start?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Mayor. The call to artists would happen as soon as we get to full council and get formal approval to proceed. ArtLink and our downtown friends tell us that's probably a 90-day process, start to finish, and then to get them installed. So we're hopeful that we'd have them installed by June-ish, and then a 6-month would get us then to first of the year, and hopefully have some good results to report after that.
And when you say installed, where and how?
Okay, yes, and so you'll recall, we can go backwards.
You can't have them in line with other parking meters.
Correct,
so
and that is a very important thing. We have seen examples of these donation meters being installed in places that appear to be parking spots, and that is deceptive, and those are the meters that report the highest revenue. Just saying. But of course, we don't want to do that, and so the intersections and these locations that were identified they'll be placed not right at the right of way, not adjacent to a parking spot. They'll be in a place that's accessible and visible to pedestrians, but not at what appears to be a parking location. And I think your other question was how.
I mean, they have to be embedded in the concrete? I mean, otherwise,
Right.
people pick them up and take them when.
No, exactly. Much the same as a regular parking meter. They'll be mounted on those poles that you always see with the parking meter. And so they will not be susceptible to someone just picking them up. And the downtown ambassadors will be keeping their eyes on these day and night to help us make sure that they're not being damaged, and will let us know if we see that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again. I appreciate this. I hope it's successful. If it is, I'd like to see it citywide, maybe putting them in front of libraries or community centers so that everyone could do healthy giving, which I think is the theme. We need to give in a healthy way. So with that, I'll take a motion.
Motion to approve proposed parking meter giving pilot program in the downtown Phoenix.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It carries. Thank you so much. So we are on to item 11, which is an analysis of the citywide plans. I know this has been an important issue to the mayor, and so you were here today to talk about what we're doing.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. I'm Katie Knudsen, Street Transportation Director. With me is Mark Molonchenko, our Deputy Director over our Programming and Project Delivery Division. So to introduce the topic before I turn it over to Mark, as you introed nicely, Madam Chair, we have a number of successful plans in the city, but we have a number of them. And I think one of the things that got brought to light is we're doing a great job of planning and thinking of those things out there, is making sure how those plans are coordinated and work together, and making sure that they don't have conflicts or contradictions within them that can cause us as a city to kind of say one thing and different things in different plans, and making sure they work together. So part of the effort we did and undertook at the direction of this subcommittee and the mayor was to look at all of these different plans. We're going to take you through that analysis right now. I will tell you, even though we've completed the analysis, our work is not done here. There's some action items that we're going to take going forward to try to deal with this going forward. And I don't want to take all of Mark's thunder, but I did want to thank the mayor and the subcommittee for the leadership on this to help address this issue, because this is not something that street transportation can take on its own. We have a lot of folks regional and local with our other departments as well that have plans that are impacted by this as well. So with that, I'll allow Mark to take away.
Thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Madam Chair and subcommittee members. As Kenny said, staff at the request of Mayor Williams and other council members looked and evaluated programs and processes or projects within the city of Phoenix transportation-wise, and or evaluated those, and we're going to talk about that process. The first bullet point here, we have staff reviewed over 50 different plans, and those 50 plans also included others that were, as Kenny said, associated regionally, like the Central Phoenix Framework Study. But I think we can also address this in the future with other projects, say with McDOT. But staff went through these, and we had a two-tiered process. The first one where we cross-referenced our existing citywide projects and analyzed those to see what type of conflicts or contradictions were apparent. The second one was we analyzed the village plans, the specific village plans, and then cross-referenced those with the citywide plans to see if there were any conflicts also apparent there. So we went about that, as I said, in a two-tiered process. And then this input will also be included in our large project underway right now, which is our Key Corridors Master Plan. The plan analysis process is going, we reviewed the documents. That was step one, and actually gathering those, and within these large documents, there's also a number of sub plans. Say with reInvent Phoenix, there are a number of, within reInvent Phoenix, 4 or 5 specific areas that have plans. So within these large plans, there are also some sub-plans that are also reviewed. And then we identify the type of contradictions or conflicts that are associated with that evaluation process. And then we looked at the type or the level of contradiction. And the next slide will go into that in a little bit more detail. And then lastly, we put that into a contradiction assessment matrix. And it's a tool that I think could be updated every time we do plans. And there could be some next steps as we talk about further in the presentation. The categories of some of the items found, there were no significant contradictions found in this analysis. But what we did find were a number of minor contradictions, and we're going to touch on 4 examples of where there's conflict between these plans. So the identified levels that were found in this evaluation are shown here. There were no significant contradictions found, but a number of minor plans that aren't aligning. But there's also a few other projects that are pending: our Key Corridor Master Plan, our design guidelines. In addition, there are also some specific plans that are associated with the villages that are not in place too. This is the example of the matrix that we use to evaluate the large citywide plans and cross-referencing. And then also the village plans, where we use the 15 villages and their plans and also cross-evaluated them with the citywide plan efforts. If we go into some of the specific areas that are identified for resolution from this evaluation process, as an example, 19th Avenue in the Bike Master Plan is termed as a bicycle corridor. But as we know, through the MAG plan also shows it as a freight corridor, but we also have light rail, we have future bus rapid transit on sections of the corridor. So I think that's an area where there is some resolution needed.
It could have major, minor conflicts there.
A second example are target goals. And this probably goes along with what you're saying, maybe a little bit more minor. But Plan Phoenix calls for 855 miles by 2020, while the 5-year bike plan calls for 906 by 2020. So that's one small example. And then secondly, bus bays. We currently went through our complete streets design guidelines, and from that, there is verbiage in there that calls for the minimization of bus bays and plans. While Plan Phoenix, there's a contradiction there because we call for a prioritization of bus bays aligning with our bus bay priority study. And then lastly, the Arizona Parkway, which is a component of the MAG Central City Framework Study, that also provides some issues in how it relates to the bicycle and pedestrian goals of what we've set with our projects. So as some of the next steps, I think we would need to address some of these items that are requiring resolution. Secondly, apply these processes and updates. As an example, there may be a way for us in future plans to have in the scope of work that the plan or the program that's established make sure that it does not have conflict with other city programs and projects. Thirdly, we really need to coordinate with our regional partners, Maricopa Association of Governments, the Maricopa County Department of Transportation are two of our regional partners, but even other cities adjacent to Phoenix, I think we would have to be in line. And then lastly, this input would again be placed in the Key Corridors Master Plan in that large-scale project.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, before we go to this last slide, which is our the final slide for questions, just wanted to highlight this slide because I think when we saw the results of this analysis, we got 50 plus plans out there. And so, you know, it'd be nice if we had just one master plan that covered everything. You know, that's probably not based in reality. But I think as we go forward, the action items here really is a couple things. One, as we're looking at projects where we have these conflicts, if we had a 19th Avenue, for example, project out there, it doesn't mean that there's not going to necessarily be conflicts between some of these plans, because some of these plans were done over a number of years and by different agencies. So I think what we need to know is to make sure that we know where those conflicts exist, so we know that we have issues we have to deal with as these projects develop. And the second piece is, and I think this is part of the conversation I think we've had with you, the mayor, as well, is these number of plans. How long should these plans be valid or viable? Should we have a required update to them so we're not talking about plans that are potentially 10 or 15 years old in 2019 that are conflicting with plans that we maybe put in place in the last couple of years? We know on our side, on the street transportation, we're going to do our best to work with some of the departments that have plans and also our agencies that are working with that have plans to try to better coordinate those things. So if we know there's conflicts, we need to work through those before those plans get finalized as they go updates. And the other thing we're also making sure we do is we're doing regular updates to our plans, because we're going to talk about one in particular after in another agenda item in this meeting, that if we're talking about a plan that was adopted in 2014, a lot of things have changed since 2014. So we need to make sure we keep our direction, our recommendations going forward fresh as well.
So do we have any questions? Go, sure.
It's interesting, Kitty, because my new changes, streets, traffic, transportation, are you going to identify modifications to any or all existing plans and ask for removal as you bring the new ones forward?
As I think we will look at those, I think the first thing is we have projects that are underway, and I know we have a lot of downtown projects, for example, they're underway. We might see contradictions between a bicycle master plan and Reinvent Phoenix, or the downtown transportation plan, or the Sunburst plan for exiting out special event traffic. As we look at those, I think the first thing we want to make sure is as we have projects that are going forward, those are coordinated through those, and as we see conflicts, I think that's where we have the opportunity to be able to talk with this subcommittee, the members of the council, how we deal with those. Because at some point in time, if we have those contradictions or those conflicts, somebody's got to win out. We've got to make a decision saying this one's gonna rule in this case. And I think that's the part we want to make sure we're very well having that dialogue with you about that as those kind of conflicts exist.
Because I know when we talked previously, I mean, there are some plans that go back a decade or more. And whether those are still applicable or not is the question. Can parts of those, I mean, or do you even need to bring it back to the council and have them deleted or whatever, terminated, I guess is a better word?
I would say, Mayor, Madam Chair, Mayor, the concern there is obviously we don't own all the plans. Some of those plans might be in one of our sister departments, another's agency. So how we deal with those?
But you need to advise the sister department.
Exactly. And I think that's the conversation we want to have, because some of those plans might be adopted by council. Some might just be ones that were put together by staff. Some might be actually voted on by the public as well, like, for example, Plan Phoenix. So there's ones we want to look at and have those conversations, how best to address those. But that's an ongoing conversation we're going to have. I think that one thing that we see as the great positive out of this is having an opportunity to be able to hit almost, I wouldn't say a reset button, but at least we can go back and see here's where our issues are and how are we going to deal with these going forward, whether it be on a project level or as we update plans as well. So,
thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you for asking us.
Yeah, I think it was very informative. I appreciate it. Are you going to share this with?
That's a great point. When we were getting ready for, thank you, Madam Chair. One of the things we had a conversation about, well, we've done all this analysis. Well, how do we use this now? Hopefully it's not just for us as city staff to use it, or even just our department. So we're looking at an opportunity to be able to make this something that can be out on our internet, so that people can see. If I want to see where the bicycle master plan and the Reinvent Phoenix line up, because if you get a chance to look at that matrix, you've got all the plans on one axis. all the other plans on the other axis, and so where they converge is where you can see whether there's no conflicts or contradictions, or if there is. So that's something that is an interactive tool, so it doesn't make sense for it just to be used by us.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
you.
You're going to stay up here, or?
I'm staying.
Okay. And talking about individual plans, you're going to give us an update on the downtown transportation plan, which is evolving as well.
That is correct. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, get to continue exactly the topic we were just talking about a little bit. But I just want to talk about, just briefly as Chris and Jason get up here, is the fact that this was the downtown transportation plan was something we undertook about 5 years ago. I just mentioned that before, that we had some plans that are 5 years. We want to do updates as we need to, as to keep things fresh. And obviously the downtown, if you looked at the downtown in 2014 versus the downtown today, a lot of stuff has changed. There's a lot of cranes out there and a lot of other things that have been going on that affected traffic and travel patterns down in downtown Phoenix. So we want to be able to keep fresh that, and so that's part of what we're here to talk about here. We're not here to talk about necessarily any recommendations at the point in time. We're in the middle of this process. So it's like the update to our update, for lack of a better way of phrasing it. But we want to give you an update on where we are with that update. And to be able to have a chance to have a conversation if you have any concerns or questions as we go forward. So with me, I have Chris Kowalski, a special project administrator with our department, Street Transportation Department, as well as Jason Pagnard with Burgess and Nipel, and they're going to take you through the presentation. Thank you.
So Madam Chair, Mayor Williams, Councilman Mendoza, thank you, Keeney, for that introduction. So Keeney touched on a little bit. In 2014, we did a downtown Phoenix comprehensive transportation study. And in that study, it was really a high-level analysis of the downtown in a whole. We know since that time, we've had monstrous amounts of development. We've had a lot of different unique situations occur downtown. So this really takes a look at taking it from that 10,000-foot level and bringing it down to a more refined level and looking at it. When doing that, what we're really looking to do is focus on that growth. We know over the last 5 years, we've had a lot of multifamily development come in. We've had a lot of commercial development coming in. We have a new grocery store that's coming this next year, which is going to be really a regional draw for the surrounding area. So we have a lot of exciting plans, but we also know there's a lot of growth coming. So we've worked with our Community Economic Development Department. We've worked with the Development Services Department to look at those future zonings that are coming in, those future business attractions that are coming in, and making sure that those are analyzed over the next 5 years, and those trips are counted, and that data is used as well. Another big one is the South Central Light Rail. So we know that is coming into the downtown area. There's specific corridors that will run in and be within. And so we want to make sure that as we're analyzing corridors, we put that placement of that train and so forth within that modeling effort to make sure that we're planning for that as well. Another big thing is we know downtown is the epicenter of events. We have a lot of folks in the entertainment industry that utilize downtown, and so we want to work with them. Take a look at what Keeney talked about a little bit, the Sunburst plan, making sure that as this development comes in and as we build the infrastructure of downtown, we're also considerate of our partners and our stakeholders in downtown. And really at the end, the purpose of this study is to ensure that we have future capacity and an acceptable level of service within our downtown area. And so that's kind of the end goal here. So just kind of a brief background, the limits of the study are 7th Avenue on the west, 7th Street to the east, I-10 to the north, Tonto Street, which is, I had to look it up myself, just north of basically Buckeye. And so those are the limits. But we really wanted to focus in on 3 key areas that we're seeing substantial amount of growth and really define those areas. And one of those would be the biocampus, the Arizona Center. We know ASU is getting ready to move forward on the biomedical campus, a lot of expansion in this area. So we want to make sure that we're involving them. We also know the entertainment area, the convention center is, like we talked about, that's kind of the epicenter for events and so forth, and making sure that they're included. But one area also is the Roosevelt area. We're seeing a significant amount of planned growth in here in terms of entertainment, in terms of office buildings, retail, restaurants. We know this is going to be a significant draw to downtown, not just from people in the downtown area, but regionally. And so we want to make sure that we're accommodating that growth that we're planning to see there. So to date, we've done a lot of data gathering. Since we kicked off the study with Jason and his team, we've worked internally with a lot of stakeholders. We talked about it a little bit, Valley Metro in terms of light rail components into the project, downtown Phoenix. We've also worked with our Community Economic Development Department, with Development Service Department, to kind of look at what that future growth might be coming into downtown and making sure that's analyzed. And so what we've really had come out of there is a baseline condition. Where do we sit today? What has been came in since 2014? And then that really gives us or sets the bar of what needs to happen going forward with this growth. And so I'm going to let Jason Pinard, G is silent, go ahead and talk about some of the recent findings that we've found thus far in the study. Jason.
Thank you, Chris. Madam Chair and subcommittee members, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. What we've identified in working with our partners that we've looked and have found approximately 90, a little over 90, 92 developments that are in various stages of completion. And that's what you see on this map here in front of you with the different shapes of red. Those are all the different developments. And between those developments and other growth that is occurring within the region, what you're seeing is a total population increase in the future condition in our horizon, that's 2025, of nearly 70% increase in total population in this downtown core area. We're looking at over 60% increase in number of households and over a 10% increase in total employment, 13% to be exact, in this downtown area. The end effect of that on the transportation network is an increase of approximately 25,000 trips daily in this downtown core area. That's about 20% increase overall of the number of trips within this downtown area by 2025. What we're looking at here also is in terms of area of growth, as Chris had mentioned, there's 3 focus areas on the east side of downtown, so east of Central, and that's where we're seeing that higher growth area. In addition, just in the southeast corner of Roosevelt and 7th Avenue, that also is an area that's experiencing high growth. So what we have here, the next 2 maps you're going to see in front of you is the operational model, the analysis that comes out of that existing and future conditions analysis. First, we take the forecast information that I just presented to you, and then we input that into a robust traffic analysis model. Because the area is so dynamic, we built actually a fancy type of a model that can be adapted and updated fairly easily moving forward. Talking about all the different plans that are going on, we took the foresight of that and built that into the model so that additional future updates can be more readily and easily done. So as part of this process, what we've collected are information from ongoing plans, and we've included in the future conditions component programmed improvements as well. So what we're looking at is existing basically today, and then 2025, which includes programmed improvements. So basically that'd be the future existing. We've collected traffic and pedestrian counts at over 20 intersections. We've collected data from other ongoing projects that are occurring right now as well, and any additional information we can gather from our stakeholders. So what I'm going to present to you here is the morning peak hour, morning versus PM. The morning is more concentrated, so it shows the information a little bit more succinctly here. So the existing condition AM is what you're looking at on the map in front of you. Basically, the green circles are good. That's what we consider acceptable levels of service. Where you'll see red X are the areas that we'll need to pay attention to moving forward. And in general, during the AM morning rush hour, the overall core of the downtown area is generally overall acceptable in terms of traffic operations. However, when you add the forecast to that in 2025, we have some little revisions that we can anticipate. But what I'd like to say, though, is the main core of the downtown area is still generally pretty good. What you end up seeing, the trend of this, is the routes to and from that downtown core. So 7th Avenue, 7th Street, Roosevelt during the PM, those routes are the ones that experience the potential congestion and issues and challenges we'll be looking at in the future. But the main core of the downtown area is still pretty good. So moving forward, what we're looking at is working with stakeholders to identify potential strategies to address those needs.
Thank you, Jason. So kind of next, sorry, where do we go from here? This spring, we're looking at doing some neighborhood outreach and also key stakeholder outreach in those 3 focus areas. So we have the biomed area, the entertainment district, Roosevelt Arts District. And so really working with them to make sure that we're taking in any type of public comments, maybe identifying corridors that they see is going to be useful for them or corridors that they're going to focus development on. So make sure that we're not missing or any type of oversight that might be important to make sure when we're looking at coming up with those solutions or those scenarios in those areas that the public comment is provided. Also during this time, we'll look at, like I said, that will kind of shape then our scenarios, or development scenarios that we'll go through in those 3 specific planned areas. And then at that same time in 2019, summer 2019, we'll work with our entertainment stakeholders. So we'll look with them, how does this convene with the Sunburst Plan? How does this growth and any type of analysis or scenarios of improvements really interact with their facilities as well? And then hopefully at the end of this year, fall of 2019, we'll be able to then take all that data, analyze it, come up with some very key scenarios, maybe phasing those in over a portion of years and so forth as those developments are needed or come online, finalize the report, and then our thought is to come back here to the subcommittee for future discussion as possible action as well. So with that said, we're available for any questions from the committee.
I have a question. Are you going to work with Maricopa County on the Diamondbacks Stadium? Because I think they're leaving, and we have no clue as to what might happen. So are you going to take that into account somehow?
I would think that, which is a big, obviously, an event draw, but any other ones as well, we'll continue to monitor as this goes. Even if we finish this, say, in 2019, this downtown transportation update, as things progress, and I think Jason's model will help us as well to be able to take in anything that may have major shifts, and obviously the future of the Diamondbacks, downtown or not downtown or whatever ends up happening in the future will impact our analysis and how we plan it accordingly as well. So it's a great point.
Any questions? Okay. Councilwoman?
Thank you. You mentioned that our population is going to increase. We need to ensure that we have the capacity downtown for the growth. But some of your transportation plans call for reducing lanes in the downtown area. So I'm trying to understand how that supports each other, growth and reducing of lanes.
Madam Chair, Member of Subcommittee, Councilwoman Mendoza, I think that's a great point. That's a balance we always have to look at in striking when we're looking at what our plans are saying to try to look at make a livable condition and quality of life improvements in downtown area for people who live and potentially work and want to commute downtown, but also balancing with the travel demand patterns that are going to be there. So I think that's something that I wouldn't say we'd have an answer today about this is going to be this way or that way. It's something, what we're trying to do is making sure that we have networks that connect in with downtown. If we have a major transportation corridor that is used by vehicles to get in and out of downtown, we need to look at that being servicing for vehicles, but also looking what corridors, alternative corridors we can use for bicycle improvements as well. If those are going to be, if it's going to be one or the other, we need to make sure that we're being smart about how we look at those networks. I will tell you as well, it's just something that we're going to continue to do. We don't necessarily have the solution today, but that's something that is going to be a competing priorities as we look at our downtown.
Okay. Can you go back to the slide, to the one before this one, right here?
Oh, this one? Sorry.
Right here, yeah. So the neighborhood outreach, that's going to be so this outreach that you have right here, is that for just the downtown area, right?
Councilwoman Mendoza, yes.
Okay, so where is the community and multi-housing in the neighborhoods represented there? Because I don't see it. And we have neighborhoods from 7th Street to 24th Street. We have multi-housing, we have neighborhoods there, and I don't see them in your plan.
So, Councilwoman Mendoza, correct. We didn't get into this precise people who notification. We've been working with our Planning Development Department. We've been working with our Community Economic Development Department to identify who those stakeholders are. We know the Roosevelt Row Action Association would be one of those, made up of community members as well as retail business owners in that area. So we'll work with those groups at identifying also the community groups, the HOAs, things of that nature that fall within this pattern to make sure that those notifications go out.
Okay.
And no notification at this time has went out.
Okay.
We're still in the planning, working with those staff. So nothing's been set to this date, but we will make sure that's done.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much for the update. We appreciate it. And can't wait to see you back. And I guess Keeney's going to stay up here.
Stay here?
It's the Keeney show today.
And Brianna, too. She's up here
yes.
for the second time. She couldn't get away from us. So, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, this is an item we want to bring back with an update on. something we had worked with the former Transportation Infrastructure Subcommittee, now with the Aviation Transportation Subcommittee, on the concept, the idea of dockless bikes. Essentially, to provide a little backstory history, we got council approval to make some ordinance changes to allow for a dockless bike program in the city of Phoenix. And so we want to talk to you just briefly about what an update on what has happened and rather maybe what hasn't happened in the time since the council's taken action on this, and also to solicit your guidance and input on where you might see us going forward with the future of this program. Thank you. And Brianna will take it away from here.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. As Keeney mentioned, City Council approved a dockless bike share program in July 2018. This was a citywide program, and so what that approval established was rates and fees associated with the program, established that any vendor had to apply for a permit and had to secure a permit before they could operate in Phoenix, as well as establish parking regulations associated with bikes. So 2 actions came out of that, really in an effort to avoid visual blight in our right-of-way. And so one of those was requiring designated parking areas. And so the intent was to take 6 months of the data that the vendors supplied to us to establish where bicycles should and shouldn't be parked and where people were utilizing them. And so that was something that the Street Transportation Department would have come back with at 6 months to establish those areas. In addition, there was a required for Lot 2 technology by February 1st, 2019, and that basically meant that the bikes had to be locked to a fixed object, and they could not just be placed out there in the right-of-way without being locked to something. So as we looked at the program application and components that needed to be developed after July, so the team worked really hard at developing the application and the permit associated with this. And so some of the components were safety, and so as we talk about safety, obviously we wanted to make sure that there was regular maintenance and safety inspections associated with the bikes, as well as meeting federal standards for bicycles. That as part of the parking, that there was a user education plan that the vendors had to implement to educate the users on how bikes should be properly parked within Phoenix. The other component was operations, and so we wanted to make sure that as part of the permit, they were required to balance the bicycles daily and that bikes weren't just abandoned out there. One of the other components was making data sharing a requirement, so that they had to provide data to the city that we could utilize to establish some of those designated parking areas that were required. So we worked really hard to put together the application and permit. One of the other items that we had to do was we had to contract with a vendor to be able to pick up those bicycles should they be abandoned, so that we could assess that $80 relocation fee. So that took a little bit of time. And so we rolled out the program in fall 2018. And so we contacted all of the vendors. We had about 5 or 6 vendors that participated in the stakeholder meetings that we held. So we contacted them and let them know that the application was available and that they could apply. And so kind of what we heard from several of the vendors is that there was a change in the industry. And so as you can see, as we've discussed electric scooters here at this subcommittee, they moved to electric scooters because they saw greater success with that over the dockless bike share program. In addition, a lot of the dockless bike share companies weren't expanding into new markets. So they had markets where they had stability and they weren't looking to operate in new markets. In addition, one of the other items that we did here was there was one company that did not have the availability to make their bicycles lock to, and why they weren't moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Keeney.
So Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we wanted to provide this just to give an update where we were, 6, 7, 8 months in, and where we are with the program. Obviously, without having any active permits in place or any companies in operation right now, we just wanted to provide the update and see if there's any guidance or discussion you'd like to have about what we do with the program going forward, if we continue it as is, or something other than that.
I have one question. I've noticed some cities now are using motorized bicycles or allowing motorized bicycles. Has there been any discussion on that as another form of dockless bike share?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, absolutely. So some of the vendors that are looking at proposing electric scooters have said that they are working on electric bikes. That's a little bit behind the electric scooters, and so we do anticipate in the future that vendors would approach us with the opportunity to look at an electric bike program.
Are there any questions?
I have a comment.
Oh.
At this point in time, I don't see us going forward with the RFP and continuing to solicit this. I think we should be able to cancel that, reevaluate if we need to come up with something for the electric bikes or motorized bikes, then bring that forth to us. But I think this is kind of old news, out of date, and we should just cancel it. Oh. That was a motion.
Okay, that's motion. Have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, is that
No.
posted?
Well, it's heavily recommended.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's all the items for presentation today. We have no more cards for call to the public, and so future agenda items, is there anything you'd like to see added?
I have a question I'd like to have staff probably bring back and answer. I know it's a very delicate situation to talk about light rail routes. But if we were to cancel or eliminate the route that was passed by the voters on Camelback and the Northeast Extension, how could that be accomplished?
Good question.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't think we have anything else, so we can adjourn. Thank you.
Good meeting.